Hey, I'm Will from Mellow Animation. I know there's lots of add-ons out there, so I'm just going to get straight to the point and tell you what this add-on does, and you can see if it will be useful for you. So here is a animation created with this. It is this red cube handing over parenting several times, landing on a conveyor to another conveyor and going through. So it's a combination of parenting and hand keying, and I want to show you how I can recreate this in a couple of minutes using Animation Step Approach Switcher. So let's go over here. I'm just going to delete the previous setup altogether, delete them all. So now we just have the cube without any animation. So first thing, you don't really need to do this, but just for as a demonstration, I'm going to switch this to the world now. So on frame 0 over here, you can see it switched to the world. Now that arm is going to come in, and I think it's around frame 40. This is going to start lifting, so I'm going to set that as my new source. I'm going to switch to that, and there we go. It switched to that. You see here, frame 40, it switched to that, and then over here, that's about frame 120. I want this one to take over, so I'm going to switch to that instead. Switch to that, you'll see here frame 120, it's switching to that, and then it's going to go through, and it stops slightly above this conveyor over here. So I'm just going to see when those little fingers or those little arms let go there. Okay, so it's at frame 125, so I'm going to select this last helper, select that because I can animate that independently as well. So I'm going to insert a keyframe there, go about 3 frames up. I'm going to drop this down. So this is hand keying now, drop it down onto the conveyor belt down there. Okay, set another keyframe. So it's dropped down, and the moment it makes contact, I'm gonna switch to that one as my source item. Switch to that as the source item, and now it follows that over there, pushes it onto there, but I want to not have a dip down there. So just before that happens, I'm going to switch it back to the world again because I want to do some hand keying there without it being influenced by that. So I'm just going to switch to the world at this point, select that as the helper I want to animate. So I'm going to insert a keyframe. I'm going to just push it over a little bit over there, and probably it's going to drag it a little bit to the side. And it's going to go in this direction a little bit. I'm going to insert a keyframe. So that's now kind of hand keying, getting it more onto that. Maybe a little bit more. Okay. Select, and there we go. And then insert the keyframe. Okay, so it's a little bit further. And now I'm going to switch to this as my new source that it's going to follow. I'm going to set that over there and switch to it. This frame, and there it goes, it follows that. So now we have the cube going up, switching parenting there, going through, hand keying drop down, parenting, keying, nice mix between the two. So yeah, that's how you set up this animation very, very quickly with this add-on. And now I'll go through, give you a more detailed description of what each of the buttons do, but it's fairly simple to use. Cool. So in a nutshell, all this tool does is you can switch constraint to the world or to objects in your scene, and then switch to another object when you want to. So the first one we did in the example was just to switch to the world. It switched to the world there and listed it here. Now, if you want to switch to another object, like we did at frame 40, you just select the thing you want to switch to, define it. And then on the frame you want to switch to it, you just switch to it over there. And this will create another entry, and you can see on frame 40, you're switching to that. And then when you do your other switch, you just define a thing you want to switch to. And then on the frame you want to switch, just create that switch on that frame. And it will list it over here for you. So that's the tool in its simplest form, but then you got all these extra tools, so I'll explain it a little bit better. Okay, so let's take it from the top so you have like a really good understanding of what the tool actually does so you can use it effectively. So basically you always start by just defining the thing you want to be constrained, so your following item. So at least that needs to be defined. So in this case it's the box over here. So now when I go and switch this to the world, let me just create that switch on frame 0. You'll see the switch then appears with the frame number that the switch happens. And you'll see here it created a position and rotation constraints for you here and animated their influence here. What it also did is it created these switch helpers. So the switch helper in this case is just positioned in the world. Now your cube is not movable anymore. It is now being controlled by this helper that's being created, and all the helpers will always be placed in this switcher helpers folder. So now you can actually animate this still because your cube is now constrained to this. But let's now go and constrain it to an arm as our second constraint. So when I select any object, that becomes the thing that this will then follow with an offset. So let's say there. So you then define the thing you wanted to follow. And then you switch to that item that's defined in this slot over here. So let's switch to that. You see it's being created there. If you go back and you select this, you can see it created some more constraints and animated them to that. Now, this constraint, so let's just, when you select on any of these, you can select the helper that's then at that point controlling your object. So if select a helper for this switch over here, you'll see now I can also animate this. I constrained them to these helpers because it gives you an extra layer of control. So in the case of constraining it to another object, it actually creates two helpers. The one is just constrained to the origin. So these ones, it's just basically the parents. So you don't need to worry about those. But it's got a nested hierarchy here, but you can always just go here and select the correct one if you want to animate that particular one, and then you can actually animate that over the top. So at this point you might ask yourself, why am I creating all these extra helpers to manage the constraints? So here's the advantage. If you look at what it's actually creating here, so this base is the thing that's actually constrained to the thing that the object is following. Then on top of that, this is then parented to the thing that's actually following the thing, and then your object itself is then parented to that. That means that you can offset these and animate them without influencing the original constraints of those objects. So for example, I can now move this and rotate and change the position of this, but it will still follow the arm that it's supposed to be constrained to. So it just gives you that extra layer of control if you need it. So we switched it here at 40. What if you want to retime that? So let's go to 40, and I want to have it grab, maybe when it's a little bit higher up, there at 43 instead. So I select that, I set that to 43 instead. So this is your retime based on the one you have selected there, and you can retime that switch. So now you see it won't pick that up until frame 43. So the timing has changed. Let me just switch that back to 40 again. So let's retime that one back to 40. Okay, so retime back to 40. So it's the original position. In order to explain what some of these realign helpers do, I just want to give you a little demonstration. So let's go over here, and then here at frame 120 we switch to this arm instead. So switch to that, and yeah, we got the switch created there, and there we go. Okay, so now if I would have retimed, with this clicked on, it will reset your helper positions when you do the retime on that particular one. So at the moment it's just set for your current frame. So if I set this to frame 43, I retime it. So it's picking up there instead. Now on my next one, those positions would have changed. So the moment the switch over happened, you see that little jump, because the position that it picked this one up from has changed, or maybe that animation of your arm has changed, or something has changed, and now there's that jump. But you can fix that jump over here by selecting that switch and just say realign helper. So if I realign the helper of that switch, you'll see now the jump, the little jump is gone. So that's what this realign helper is for. When you do a retime, by default, it will realign. If you have this clicked on, it will realign to that new position if you have this clicked on automatically. If you have this one clicked on and you realign that one, it will go through all your following switches and also realign all those helpers for you as well automatically, but it's not always what you want. So the retime, you can retime these. You just have to think about the positions things are grabbed and how it's going to influence things down the line. So that's the only thing you've got to keep in mind when you do this kind of retiming operations. But the retiming is it's easy to do, but you have to think about it a little bit, what the consequences downstream is of your retime. If it grabs it in a different position, it's going to influence things down the line. But if you have that clicked on, it would fix that for you. If you have this clicked on, it will do it all the way to the ones that's subsequent to that retime, if you want to do them all at the same time. It's just your box will obviously end up in a different position at the end. This button over here is select. You select any of these and you can select the helper, and then you can animate those helpers if you want to add extra animation keys to them. Obviously, if I animate that to a different position, say if I move that, I'll have that jump. That's also what you can then fix with this. So this one, I can go and I can realign that helper. See here, and then that is fixed. And then that one is going to jump, so I can fix that as well. So realign the helper on that one. There we go. So that's what this realign helper is for, to get rid of those jumps if any of the positions have changed. If you want a better visual representation of what's happening in your scene, that is what this create markers from list is for. So if you click that, it will create these markers in your timeline, so you can actually also see when your switches are happening. And if you don't want them there, you can just delete them all as well. Then for your animation, let me just reload the original animation. So this has got the whole animation in. And by the end of this, if you want to bake it all down to keyframes and get rid of this entire setup, you can just bake the entire thing over here with bake to keyframes. It will run through a few times, and then all those helpers are gone and everything is just purely on keyframes. Okay, so that's almost it. The other way, so you can bake stuff down, and the other way, if you want to get rid of the entire setup or a specific switch that you don't particularly like, you can just go here and delete that switch, and that switch just won't happen then at that point. Or if you're unhappy with the whole thing and you want to start again, I mean, these are fairly quick to do, so sometimes it's just easier to restart it. So in that case, you can just basically go to the beginning where the object's in the original position and just delete all, and the entire setup will be gone. And just a small note that this works on armatures as well. So for example, that's how I did with this wild swinging neck, kind of independent animation on the head. Originally, I just selected, defined my head by picking a bone. You don't even need to go into pose mode. So I defined that and I switched that to the world. And now the head is actually controlled by this object instead. And you can see here, I can animate this independently and just have the neck pointing to it. So yeah, you can, it's not just for objects, it works in armatures too. Okay, and just a last final tip is this set helper size. So in this case, these boxes are 1 by 1 meters, and I've actually deliberately set it to be 1.1 meters so we can actually see them. But you can control the size of these helpers of the boxes being created by adjusting this. So if you make it slightly bigger than your object, they're easier to see and then easier to animate. So that's just a little tip there. So in the end, basically you got the ability then to switch to the parenting to different objects, make them follow different things. Over time, change the timing of it. And because they attach to helpers, you can use the helpers and actually take advantage of that and animate things over the top. Using the helpers as well, everything kind of like lines up. You just have to think about it a little bit. But at least then it becomes easy to manage. Just so you know, this is the standalone version of this, but it's actually part of a bigger package called Animation Snapper Pro, the main package. And this tool is actually included in that package of Animation Snapper Pro that has the full tool set for snapping, and it's not as constraint based as this. So it just gives you a lot of extra options for backward snapping, snapping to vertices, to elements, and lots of other features. So check that out. But yeah, so this is like the sub tool of that, but it's also a standard tool. It's also a standalone tool by itself. So if you think this could help you, by all means pick it up. But if you want the extra tool set, have a look at Animation Snapper Pro as well. Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers.